Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. And of course, here's your meme of the day, brought to you by FiveMind.com. You know, it's crazy because for the last decade, they've been telling us that Donald Trump is a madman. He's crazy, a danger to democracy, a psycho, a political Tasmanian devil that's going to destroy everything and anything that he touches. But for somebody who's supposedly so innately destructive, I find myself often asking the question, why is it that he seems to be the only person in the political space actually fixing things? Why is it that this supposed man who is so destructive has such a track record of doing the exact opposite, repairing things? And he also, time and time again, seems to be tackling issue after issue, offering very clever solutions, getting straight to the crux of the issues, and bringing in some real policy reform. You know, I just don't see the whole destructive narrative. And once again, I think the president is shining on the auto issue, doing what he does best, applying some very, very nice soft touch policies that really tackle the nuance of these trade issues. Let me show you guys exactly what's going on and what the media seems to be purposely ignoring as they're focused on whatever the tabloid nonsense of the week is. Let me show you guys exactly what's going on. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. All right, folks, so take a look at this announcement from the White House.
Well, we're talking about CAFE standards, a very big deal, very important. Today, my administration is taking historic action to lower costs for American consumers, protect American auto jobs, and make buying a car much more affordable for countless American families and also safer. We're officially terminating Joe Biden's ridiculously burdensome, horrible, actually, CAFE standards that imposed expensive restrictions and all sorts of problems, gave all sorts of problems to automakers. And we're not only talking about here, we're talking about outside of our country, because nobody could do it. Nobody wanted to do it, and it was ridiculous, very expensive. It put tremendous upward pressure on car prices. Combined with the insane electric vehicle mandate, Biden's burdensome regulations helped cause the price of cars to soar more than 25%. And in one case, they went up 18% in 1 year. Today, we're taking one more step to kill the Green New Scam. It's part of the greatest scam, probably, well, other than Russia, and a few others I could name. The greatest scam in American history, the Green New Scam. And it's a quest to end the gasoline-powered car. This is what they wanted to do, even though we have more gasoline than any other country by far. And people want the gasoline car. They want everything. They want electric. They want to have lots of alternatives, but they do want the gasoline car. Right now, it's leading away by a lot. The car business is a very interesting business, but we want to keep it that way.
You know, for the last however many months, the Democrats haven't shut up about affordability. And they keep pointing at the auto sector, pointing at the cars, saying, oh, look how expensive cars are. And then, of course, attempting to make a link to President Trump's tariffs. But by pretty much start of the year, cars were already at record high costs.
For the first time, the average cost of a new car in the US has topped $50,000. That is in part down to tariffs, with experts warning of an even bigger hit on prices next year.
The average cost of a new car is $50,000. And guess what? All of that happened under Joe Biden. It wasn't just the monetary mismanagement that led to ridiculous overspending levels for 5 years for constraint, while the economy was shut down and supply chains were in complete dysfunction. It wasn't just the monetary imbalance, pumping up the money supply while reducing productivity, meaning less goods and more money to buy those goods, aka massive inflation, in this case hyperinflation. It was also the fact that they added insult to injury during that time by hitting the auto sector with all kinds of regulatory burdens. And so please, miss me with this, oh, tariffs are making cars more expensive, when a 2008 Honda costs like $15,000 nowadays. And all of that happened over the last 4 years of Joe Biden's administration. Well, now comes the common sense approach, the common sense solution, the first solution of peeling back those Biden regulations that have added to the cost of vehicles. But not only that, in true Trump fashion, they're coming at this issue with a multi-pronged approach tackling multiple different issues of efficiencies.
The other things we're doing is separate from this meeting, but I think everybody here would agree with it. If you go to Japan, where I just left, and if you go to South Korea and Malaysia and other countries, they have a very small car, sort of like the Beetle used to be with the Volkswagen. They're very small, they're really cute. And I said, how would that do in this country? And everyone seems to think good, but you're not allowed to build them. And I've authorized the secretary to immediately approve the production of those cars. So you'll be able to buy, they really are, they're actually, some of them are really beautiful, actually. If you take a look, Honda, some of the Japanese companies do a beautiful job, but we're not allowed to make them in this country, and I think you're going to do very well with those cars.
Now they're talking about rolling back some of these regulations that stop car manufacturers from essentially making simple products, and he was also mentioning this in reference to tractors as well.
Also give the tractor companies, John Deere and all of the companies that make the equipment, we're going to take off a lot of the environmental restrictions that they have on machinery. It's ridiculous. I know because I buy a lot of that machinery for different things. We have a lot of big clubs with, hundreds, thousands of acres. And I buy a lot of stuff, and you buy it, it's got so much equipment on it for the environmental, it doesn't do anything, except it makes the equipment much more expensive and much more complicated to work. And it's not as good as the old days. And we're going to take a lot of that nonsense off of the equipment, which is going to reduce, and we're going to do it, and we're going to say you're going to reduce the prices. We're not going to do it and they're not going to reduce. They're going to have to reduce their prices because farming equipment has gotten too expensive. And a lot of the reason is because they put these environmental excesses on the equipment, which don't do a damn thing except make it complicated, make it impractical. And you really have to be, in many cases, you need about 185 IQ to turn on a lawnmower.
Well, this, I think, is a very important issue. Nowadays, all these industries are so overly regulated. The standards are so completely over the top. There's so many hoops and hurdles, and it adds so much cost to the production of these vehicles and also commercial equipment. Well, now the Trump suggestion is to, again, peel back some of that stuff and allow companies to start making simple products again. And of course, what this does also is it breeds more competition because now smaller engineering firms could start competing in some of these entry-level spaces. The Democrats want you to think that it's the tariffs that are making everything more expensive, but really it's the massive, never-ending growth in government and their connection with these few oligarchy corporations who have set up this racket to basically control the entire industry. Cars keep getting more and more and more expensive. You're forced to buy more and more useless plastic crap and tech and gadgets, and it's just all become so burdensome, hasn't it? When we're talking about a more macroeconomic view, just think about how much could change if all of a sudden a lot of this stuff is lifted and people can just start making things again. Imagine how much more productive we'd get if we started building maybe a little bit more like China. There's no reason why China should be producing a good for $20,000 and then when we produce it domestically, it's $60,000. The difference should not be that significant, especially not when you're doing things at scale. Sure, they have cheap labor, but it's really not that much cheaper. And at the end of the day, when you're talking about commodities and materials, the market prices are pretty much global. We should be able to produce high quality goods at a relatively cheap cost, but we can't. Because government doesn't let you. The taxes, the regulation, the compliance, the this, that, and the other. It's time to just get back to building. Imagine if we could start building simple things, and then young, aspiring entrepreneurs who aren't working with much capital can start buying affordable quality equipment and starting businesses and being productive. That changes the whole freaking game. And so these are, again, some really smart policy proposals. Just like Donald Trump's suggestion to put money in the hands of the consumer in relation to the Obamacare subsidy issue. Again, the Democrats tell you that Donald Trump's destroying everything, his tariffs are destroying everything, but he's really the guy coming in and actually fixing things. And he's coming in and pushing what is desperately needed right now, because we are headed into a AI, robotics, industrial revolution. And the last thing we need is to have tree-hugging frickin' weirdos strapping us by our ankles while China's outrunning us by a frickin' mile, because they could actually mobilize and do things. We need to be lifting the tax and regulation burdens. We need to push forth American innovation and production, because really it's the number one issue right now. We need AI, we need robotics, so we can end this reliance on importing third world labor, and we need to be leading the world in terms of industrial robotics. We should be mass producing Teslas and other vehicles at a rate uncomparable to anywhere else in the world. You know how fancy television sets back in the day were like $15,000, and now you could get a 75-inch 4K TV for like, $400, maybe even less sometimes if you get a good deal? Well, that's because of all the innovation that happened in that space. Imagine we do the same thing, but with vehicles and equipment and commercial equipment and vehicles. Imagine we're pumping out Teslas like you can't even freaking imagine. Boom, $10,000 to $20,000 a pop. They've become cheap everyday toys. Well, that's exactly what China's trying to do. We need to beat them to it. We need to be leading the world in all of these technologies, and yes, in production as well, in high-tech manufacturing, creating good engineering jobs for American citizens, rather than endless Uber drivers freaking everywhere. And the only thing that's going to stop us from getting there are the left leftist environmentalists, these freaking bureaucrats who want to get in the way of every process, every transaction, every innovation. They want to limit, constrict. They got to drop the freaking shackles so we can run. And that's exactly what President Trump is saying here. The left will probably tell you that, oh no, you can't do this. 10 billion gazillion people will now die. But come on. Cars don't need to be so complicated. There could be simpler cars on the road. There could be mini cars on the road. The companies that make the best, most efficient, most clean, most safe products will end up winning. We don't need government to be controlling every aspect of business. The red tape has to be removed, and American ingenuity has to be completely and utterly unleashed on the world. The only thing standing in the way is Congress and the massive bureaucrat machine. Anyways, that's pretty much what I got for you guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.